The morning sun baked the red soil of Fort Benning, Georgia, turning the air heavy and bright. Soldiers moved across the training field in steady rhythm, boots thudding, commands echoing, dust rising in pale clouds. Among them walked Captain Emily Carter, a medic whose calm presence seemed to cool even the hottest day. She wasn't like the others, no loud laughter, no ego, no hunger for medals. Where others carried rifles, she carried gauze, syringes, and quiet courage. Emily had been on base for almost 4 years, long enough for everyone to know her reputation. To the new cadets, she was the angel with the field kit. To the veterans, she was the one who doesn't flinch. And to herself, she was just a woman trying to keep others alive in a world that often rewarded destruction over compassion. Her quarters were small: one bed, one desk, a coffee mug with a faded Red Cross emblem. On the wall hung a framed photo of her old unit in Kandahar, Afghanistan. It was the last picture taken before an explosion tore through their convoy. 5 out of 9 never came home. She didn't like to talk about that day. The Army had given her medals for valor under fire, but she'd left a piece of herself buried under Afghan dust. That morning, she finished sorting supplies in the medical tent: bandages, saline bags, antiseptic, morphine injectors, when she heard shouting outside. Another training accident, probably. She grabbed her kit and stepped out into the sun. A small group of recruits had gathered around a man sitting on the ground, clutching his leg. His helmet was off, his hair soaked with sweat. "Move aside," Emily ordered calmly. Her voice carried quiet authority. The recruits obeyed instantly. The injured man looked up, squinting against the light. He was new Private Jason Rudd, according to the name stitched on his chest. Broad shoulders, square jaw, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much for a 20-year-old. Emily had heard the name already. He was the troublemaker, the one who challenged his drill sergeant, the one with the chip on his shoulder. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "Twisted my ankle on the run," he said through gritted teeth. "Nothing serious." She examined the swelling, pressed gently, and saw him flinch. "It's sprained," she said. "You need rest." "I don't need rest," he snapped. "I need to finish the damn course." Emily met his glare evenly. "You need to follow orders if you plan on staying in one piece." The recruits snickered behind her, and Jason's face hardened. "Figures," he muttered. A medic telling a soldier what to do. Emily ignored the jab. "A medic keeps soldiers alive, Private," she replied softly. "Even the ones who don't think they need saving." He didn't answer. She bandaged the ankle, taped it neatly, and stood. "Report to the infirmary in an hour," she said. "If it swells worse, I'll know you didn't listen." When she walked away, she could feel his glare burning into her back. That was her first real encounter with Jason Rudd, but not the last. Over the next few weeks, he became a frequent visitor to her tent. Sometimes it was a bruised knuckle from punching the obstacle course wall. Sometimes a bloodied lip from a fight. Each time, he'd sit on the cot in silence while she worked, jaw clenched, pride refusing to speak. "You're going to destroy yourself before you even deploy," she said once, cleaning a cut on his forehead. He smirked faintly. "Better that than rotting behind a desk like you." She looked up sharply. "You think saving lives is rotting?" Jason's smirk faded. For a split second, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes, something lost, maybe even frightened, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "I didn't ask to be saved," he said coldly. "Not yet," Emily murmured. "But you will." Fort Benning wasn't just a training ground, it was a pressure cooker. Recruits came in full of fire and dreams, and the Army broke them down to rebuild them stronger. Some handled it. Others cracked under the weight. Emily saw it every day. The sleepless eyes, the sudden outbursts, the quiet ones who stared too long at nothing. She'd been trained to treat wounds, but no one had trained her to patch up broken minds. Jason worried her. He trained too hard, slept too little, and kept to himself. When he wasn't running drills, he was alone, sitting by the wire fence at dusk, staring out at the endless field as if expecting ghosts to walk across it. Emily noticed because she did the same thing once. One evening, she found him sitting there again. The sunset painted his face gold and red. She walked up quietly and sat beside him without a word. He didn't look at her. "You here to check if I'm still breathing, Captain?" "Just needed air," she said, watching the horizon. "You?" "Couldn't sleep." Too damn quiet. Silence stretched between them. The base buzzed faintly in the distance generators, voices, faint radio chatter. "You've been overseas, haven't you?" he asked suddenly. She nodded. "Twice. What's it like?" Emily hesitated. "Loud," she said finally. "And lonely. You never forget the sounds." Jason's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I bet." She turned toward him. "You've seen something too, haven't you?" He didn't answer, just got up and brushed the dirt off his pants. "Doesn't matter. Not supposed to talk about it. Sometimes that's the problem," she said softly. But he was already walking away. Later that night, Emily sat on her bunk, staring at her old photograph again. Her unit, smiling before the blast. She touched one face the medic she'd trained under, Sergeant Leah Morgan. Leah had died shielding a wounded soldier. Emily had never forgiven herself for not being fast enough to pull her out. That guilt had shaped her vow. No more killing. No more fighting. She would heal, not harm. But as the weeks went by, Jason's volatility deepened. During drills, he pushed himself to collapse. During meals, he barely spoke. When an instructor shouted at him, he'd go pale, not angry, just distant, like he wasn't there at all. The others began to whisper, "That guy's not right. He's gonna snap one day." Emily didn't join in. She'd seen that haunted look before soldiers carrying ghosts no one else could see. Then one afternoon, during a standard live simulation exercise, she caught sight of Jason again, struggling to keep formation. His ankle, still weak from the sprain, was slowing him down. The sergeant barked at him. "Move, Private. You want to go home? You want to wash out?" Jason gritted his teeth, stumbling forward. The rage in his eyes was pure fire and pain. Emily watched from the side, unease twisting in her gut. Something inside him was unraveling, thread by thread. That night, as thunder rolled in from the south, she lay awake, listening to the wind rattle her window. A strange heaviness filled the air, like a warning. The base slept, but Emily couldn't. Somewhere deep down, a medic's intuition whispered to her, the kind that came before disaster. She didn't know it yet, but the next few days would test every belief she had about life, death, and what it truly meant to be a healer. For now, she was just the medic who refused to fight. Soon, she would learn that sometimes, to save a life, you have to pick up the weapon you fear the most. The rain came hard that week, turning the Georgia dirt into thick mud that swallowed boots and slowed drills. For most soldiers, bad weather meant a lighter workload, a reprieve from the merciless sun. But for Private Jason Rudd, it meant one thing more time trapped inside his own head. He'd joined the army to escape, not to serve. Back home in Odessa, Texas, there was nothing left for him, no father, no mother, just a string of half-finished jobs and a lifetime of mistakes. When the recruiter told him the army could turn him into something better, he signed without thinking. But better didn't come easy. Every shout from a superior, every loud bang during drills, it all brought him back to a memory he refused to relive. That morning, the platoon was assembling for a run. The rain came down sideways, cold and relentless. The cadets grumbled, their voices half drowned by the storm. "Move it, Rudd," shouted Sergeant Howard, the kind of man whose voice could split thunder. "You think the enemy's gonna wait for sunshine?" Jason didn't respond. He was already soaked, shivering, and his sprained ankle from weeks earlier throbbed with every step. But pain was easier than memory. He'd take it over the flashes that haunted him: shattered glass, screams, the ringing in his ears after the explosion. "Pick it up, Rudd," Howard yelled again. Jason pushed harder, mud splattering across his uniform, lungs burning. The cadence chants of the squad echoed ahead of him. He fell behind, each stride heavier than the last. And then, out of nowhere, a familiar voice cut through the rain. "Private Rudd, stop." Jason turned and saw Captain Emily Carter, standing under a dripping tarp, arms crossed, her medic's patch gleaming faintly under the gray sky. "You're limping again," she said. "I'm fine, ma'am," he snapped, breath ragged. "Just twisted it again." "That ankle hasn't healed," she said, stepping closer. "You keep this up, you'll do permanent damage." He wiped rain from his face. "I said I'm fine." Emily's expression softened. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Jason." That word Jason made him flinch. She was the only one who said his name like that, not Private Rudd or recruit. It felt personal, disarming, like she saw through the walls he'd built. "I'm not proving anything," he muttered. "I'm surviving." "Then learn to survive smart," she said, handing him a compression wrap. "Rest it, that's an order." He hesitated, glaring at her, then snatched the wrap from her hand. "Whatever you say, Captain." As he walked away, she sighed. She knew that look, the blend of pride and pain that came before something dangerous. He was running from ghosts, and if someone didn't catch him, he'd run straight into them. Later that evening, the barracks were loud with chatter and laughter. Poker games, jokes, radio music. Jason sat apart, earphones in, staring at the small notebook in his hand. It was worn and water-stained. Inside were the names of the 5 men he'd lost overseas. He'd written them every night since he came home, trying to remember their faces, their voices, their promises. When Private Daniels, one of the cockier recruits, spotted him sitting alone, he smirked. "Hey, Rudd, you writing love letters to yourself again?" Jason didn't respond. Daniels kept going. "Or maybe you're praying that Captain Carter comes to tuck you in again." The table around them erupted in laughter. Jason's jaw clenched. He tried to ignore it, but Daniels leaned closer. "Heard she fixed you up like a baby last week. You gonna cry for Mommy Medic next time you twist an ankle?" Before anyone could blink, Jason slammed his fist onto the table, sending cards and beer cans flying. The room went dead silent. "Say that again," Jason growled. Daniels smirked, leaning back. "Relax, hero. Just a joke." Jason's eyes burned with something fierce, something that didn't look like anger. It looked like fear disguised as rage. He stood up so fast his chair toppled. "Don't ever talk about her like that." Daniels sneered. "Guess we hit a nerve." The next thing anyone knew, Jason's fist connected with Daniel's jaw. The crack echoed through the room. Daniels hit the floor, clutching his face, blood dripping between his fingers. "Rudd!" someone shouted. "What the hell, man?" Jason's chest heaved. He looked at his own hands, as if he didn't recognize them. Then he stormed out into the rain before the MPs could arrive. Emily heard about the fight an hour later. Sergeant Howard brought her the report, his face red with anger. "Your favorite patient just put Private Daniels in the infirmary. Broken jaw." Emily set her coffee down slowly. "Is Jason okay?" "Jason?" Howard snapped. "You mean Rudd, the ticking time bomb? He's lucky we're not sending him home in cuffs." "Where is he now?" she asked. Howard scowled. They've confined him to quarters until review. He's your problem now, Captain. Maybe you can fix his brain the way you fix his ankle. Emily said nothing. She simply nodded and walked out into the storm. She found Jason sitting on the barrack steps, soaked, head down. The rain had washed most of the mud off his uniform, but his eyes were hollow. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked lost. Rough day, she said quietly, sitting beside him. He didn't answer. I read the report, she continued. You could have really hurt him. He deserved it, Jason muttered. Maybe, she said. But what about you? Do you deserve this? He looked at her then, eyes tired, voice low. I don't know what I deserve anymore. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was rain pattering on metal and earth. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object, a flattened bullet casing attached to a string. You see this? She asked. He frowned. What is it? Something I kept from Afghanistan, she said. It hit the ground next to me the day my mentor died. She was a medic too. She told me something I never forgot. You can't save everyone, but you can still try. Jason's expression flickered. You think I can be saved? I think you already want to be, she said softly. You just don't know how. The next day, Jason was back in training. Though his movements were slower, his energy dulled. Emily watched from the sidelines, clipboard in hand. He avoided eye contact, kept his head low, did everything by the book. But something in his eyes told her this calm was temporary, a thin layer over something volatile. That night, the base psychologist came to the infirmary. You filed concern for Private Rudd? He asked. Yes, Emily said. He's showing signs of trauma sleeplessness, aggression, flashbacks. He needs evaluation. The psychologist sighed. We're short-staffed. I can schedule him in a few days. A few days might be too late, she warned. But her words went nowhere. Paperwork moved slower than paying. 2 days later, Emily was treating a soldier for dehydration when she heard shouting outside Jason again. He was arguing with another cadet near the vehicles, face red, voice shaking. Before anyone could step in, he threw his helmet to the ground and stormed off toward the field. Rudd, Emily called out, running after him. He didn't stop. When she finally caught up, he was standing near the firing range, staring down at his hands like he couldn't recognize them. I can't do this, he whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. See what? She asked gently. He looked up at her. Rain had stopped, but his voice was trembling. The convoy. My friends. The blood. It never stops. Emily's chest tightened. Jason, you need help. You can't carry this alone. He took a step back, shaking his head. You don't understand. I do, she said quietly. I've been where you are. His breathing quickened. No, you don't know what it's like to watch them die and keep breathing. Emily didn't flinch. You're right, she said. But I know what it's like to wish you hadn't. That stopped him. For the first time, Jason's defenses broke. His voice cracked. Then why does it feel like I'm already dead? Because you've been fighting a war that's over, she said. Let me help you end it. He looked away, fists clenched, then turned and walked off without another word. Emily watched him disappear into the barracks. Her gut told her this wasn't over, not even close. Something inside him was reaching a breaking point. And the next time he broke, it wouldn't be at words. It would be at gunfire. The morning began like any other, humid, heavy, and humming with tension. The base was alive before sunrise, boots pounding on gravel, voices echoing through the training fields. Captain Emily Carter moved briskly across the compound, clipboard in hand, checking equipment and medical stations. She'd been assigned to oversee that day's live simulation exercise, a coordinated drill involving simulated explosives, blank ammunition, and combat tactics. Everything about it was routine. Until it wasn't. The air was already thick with heat as the platoon assembled on the field. Recruits adjusted helmets, secured vests, and double-checked rifles loaded with blanks. Emily stood near the medic truck, her kit ready. Her job was to stand by treat minor scrapes, dehydration, or the rare panic attack. She'd done this dozens of times. But that morning, something felt off. Across the field, Private Jason Rudd was loading his gear in silence. His movements were mechanical, his face unreadable beneath the shadow of his helmet. He hadn't spoken to Emily since their talk near the firing range 2 nights before. She noticed the deep circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hand as he checked his rifle. "Private Rudd," the sergeant barked. "Eyes up, soldier." Jason snapped to attention, but said nothing. His knuckles whitened around the weapon. Emily frowned. She could feel it again, that same quiet pressure she used to feel before ambushes overseas. The air seemed too still, the world too sharp. She scanned the range, the soldiers, the gear, nothing out of place. Still, her instincts whispered, something's wrong. The whistle blew. Instantly, chaos erupted, gunfire, shouting, smoke. Soldiers dove for cover, returned fire, advanced in squads across the mock battlefield. It was meant to simulate a real ambush. Unpredictability, noise, confusion. Emily stayed by the med tent, scanning for signals, raised arms, colored flags, signs of injury. She kept her focus steady. But halfway through the exercise, she heard a different explosion, deeper, louder, not part of the simulation. The ground shook beneath her boots. Her heart lurched. That wasn't a blank charge. That was real ordnance. The radio on her vest crackled to life. Control to field units, possible live detonation near Zone C. All personnel halt movement immediately. Emily's instincts kicked in. She grabbed her bag and sprinted toward Zone C. Smoke rolled across the dirt field, soldiers shouting over one another. A training vehicle lay on its side, one tire shredded. She knelt beside a disoriented recruit, checking his pulse shock, minor concussion. But as she called for assistance, her eyes caught a flash of movement just beyond the wreckage. Jason. He was standing in the open, frozen. His rifle hung in his hands, not pointed down, not pointed up, but aimed squarely at another soldier about 20 feet away. "Rudd," someone yelled. "What are you doing?" The other cadet, Private Daniels, the one he'd fought weeks ago, was backed up against a sandbag wall, hands raised, face pale. The drill had stopped. Every soldier turned to the sound of that single rifle being cocked. Jason didn't move. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His lips moved, whispering words no one could hear. Emily's blood went cold. She'd seen this before, the 1,000-yard stare, the disconnection from reality, the mind lost between memory and present. "Jason," she whispered under her breath, already moving. "Rudd, drop the weapon," Sergeant Howard shouted. "That's an order." But Jason didn't hear him. His pupils were dilated. He was breathing in short gasps, like a man drowning on dry land. The sound of gunfire from earlier still echoed faintly across the base, mixing with his memories, blurring the line between simulation and nightmare. He wasn't in Georgia anymore. In his mind, he was back in Kunduz province, dust swirling, screams in his ears, his friends pinned behind a burning Humvee. He saw their faces, heard their cries. "They left me," he muttered, voice cracking. "They left me there." Emily stopped 20 feet away. She raised both hands. "Jason," she said gently. "It's Captain Carter. Look at me. No response. She took one slow step forward. You're not in Afghanistan. You're at Fort Benning. You're safe. Jason's rifle twitched. The barrel trembled between her and Daniel's. His breathing grew faster, harsher. They're not real, he said, voice trembling. None of this is real. Then let's put the rifle down, okay? Emily said, voice calm, steady. We can talk. Behind her, the other soldiers crouched low, waiting for orders. The commanding officer whispered into his radio. Peas en route? But Emily waved them off. Don't move, she hissed. You'll spook him. Jason's eyes darted wildly. Sweat ran down his temple. I can't go back there, he whispered. I can't. You're not there, Emily repeated, her heart pounding. You're here. With me. The air hung heavy, every second stretching thin as wire. The only sound was Jason's shallow breathing and the low hum of the wind cutting through the training field. Emily's mind raced. She'd been trained to treat trauma, but not like this. Her options were few. Any sudden move could trigger him. The MPs would arrive soon, but if they came in armed, things could spiral fast. Jason, she said softly, remember what we talked about? You said you didn't know what you deserve. You remember what I said? His eyes flicked toward her, uncertain. You said I wanted to be saved. That's right, she said. And I still believe that. So let me save you now, please. His grip loosened for half a second. Hope flickered in her chest. Then the radio on her shoulder crackled again, loud and sharp. Captain Carter, stand clear, security inbound. The sound shattered the fragile calm. Jason flinched violently, spinning toward the noise. The rifle jerked upward straight toward Daniel's. Emily didn't think. Instinct took over. She moved faster than thought, crossing the space between them in 3 strides. Her hand clamped over the barrel of the rifle, forcing it upward just as Jason's finger twitched. A blank round discharged with a deafening crack, the flash lighting both their faces. Jason shouted, struggling, "Get off me!" Jason, drop it. She yelled, twisting the weapon sideways. He resisted, his strength raw, desperate. The rifle slipped between them, scraping her arm. Pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't stop. They stumbled in the mud, boots sliding, breaths ragged. Emily used her training to disarm and subdue. She kicked at his leg, knocked his balance off, and drove her shoulder into his chest. They fell hard, the rifle skidding a few feet away. Jason's eyes went wide, breath heaving. I didn't mean, I know, Emily gasped, pinning his arm. I know you didn't. The MPs arrived seconds later, weapons drawn but held low. Stand down. One shouted. Rifles clear. Emily yelled back. She stayed on top of Jason until she felt his body stop fighting, until his muscles gave way, his hands trembling. When they finally pulled him to his feet, he didn't look angry. He looked broken. He met Emily's eyes. I heard them screaming, he whispered. I thought it was happening again. Her throat tightened. It's over, Jason. You're safe now. But deep inside, Emily knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not for him. Not for her. The sound of that rifle shot would echo in her mind for years. Because in that moment, she'd crossed her own line. She'd always said, I'm a medic, not a fighter. But to save him, to save everyone else, she'd had to fight. And in that split second, when she grabbed the weapon from his hands, she'd realized something terrifying. Sometimes healing and hurting are separated by a single heartbeat. The rest of the base was silent that night. The MPs filed reports. The commanding officer praised her quick intervention. The psychologists were called. But Emily didn't hear any of it. She sat alone in the dim medical bay, staring at her reflection in the metal cabinet. Her palms were scraped, bruised from the struggle. Her uniform was torn, smudged with dirt. When she closed her eyes, she didn't see Jason with the gun. She saw the faces of her old unit, the ones she'd failed to save overseas. And now, one thought pulsed through her like a wound reopening. How many more could she save before she had to fight again? The night after the drill, Fort Benning didn't sleep. Security lights blazed across the compound, painting long shadows on the barracks. The MPs had sealed off the training zone, cordoning it with yellow tape as investigators collected shell casings and radio logs. Soldiers whispered rumors in the hallways. Some said Jason Rudd had gone rogue. Others said Captain Emily Carter tackled him before he could shoot a comrade. Only a few knew the truth, and Emily wished she wasn't one of them. She sat in the small office outside the infirmary, elbows on her knees, still in her dirt-stained uniform. Her hands were wrapped in gauze, knuckles scraped from the scuffle. Across from her, the base commander, Colonel Davis, paced silently with a clipboard. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. "Captain Carter," he began finally, "you understand the gravity of what happened today?" "Yes, sir." "You tackled an armed soldier during a live drill. You made physical contact with a weapon, and you overrode a direct command to stand clear. Do you deny that?" "No, sir." He set the clipboard down and leaned forward. "Then explain to me why." Emily took a slow breath. "Because if I hadn't, sir, Private Daniels would be dead." Davis stared at her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he sighed and rubbed his temples. "You realize how close we came to disaster? A live rifle discharge during a simulation. One wrong angle, and we'd be writing letters to 2 families tonight." "I know that," Emily said quietly. "But I did what I had to do." Davis studied her face. He saw no pride there, only exhaustion. "The MPs are holding Rudd in isolation. He's under psychiatric watch. You're listed in the report as the primary witness and as the one who subdued him." Her stomach twisted. "What will happen to him?" "That depends on the evaluation. If he's declared unstable, they'll send him to a VA hospital under supervision. If not, he faces discharge and a possible court-martial for endangering personnel." Emily's hands clenched. "He doesn't need punishment. He needs help." Davis frowned. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't seen soldiers break before?" He sighed, voice softening. "I know you care, Carter. That's what makes you good at your job. But sometimes, caring isn't enough." He turned toward the door. "Get some rest. You'll need to give your statement tomorrow at 080." "Oh, when he left?" Emily just sat there, staring at the empty room, at the silent walls, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, and the dark stain of mud still clinging to her boots. Her body was still, but her mind was racing. At 0300, she found herself back at the medical bay. The night nurse gave her a quiet nod as she walked past. Through the observation window at the end of the hall, she saw Jason Rudd sitting on the edge of a cot, hands cuffed loosely in front of him. A military psychiatrist sat nearby, clipboard in hand. Jason looked nothing like the man from the field. His uniform was gone, replaced by gray sweats. His eyes were hollow, staring at the floor. The psychiatrist asked questions. Jason barely responded. When Emily stepped closer, his head lifted slightly. The guard at the door raised a hand. "Captain, he's under restriction." "I just want a minute," she said softly. The guard hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute. She stepped into the room. The air smelled of antiseptic and quiet sorrow. Jason didn't speak at first. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "They told me I almost killed someone." Emily sat across from him. "You didn't. You froze." You panicked. It could have gone worse, but it didn't. He nodded slowly. That's not what I remember. I remember the noise. The fire. Daniels looked like he stopped himself, voice cracking. It all came back. Emily's throat tightened. I know. No, you don't. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something like anger, not at her, but at himself. You don't know what it's like to wake up and not know where you are. To smell gunpowder and think you're back there again. To see everyone's face turn into someone you lost. She swallowed hard. You're right. I can't know. But I've treated soldiers who've lived through it. And I know this isn't your fault. Jason shook his head. You shouldn't have stopped me. Why? Because now everyone knows I'm broken. The words hit her like a gut punch. She wanted to tell him he wasn't broken, just wounded in a way the eye couldn't see. But she couldn't find the right words. Jason, she said finally, you saved more people than you'll ever know. You held on longer than most. That's not weakness. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned away. They're going to throw me out anyway. Emily rose slowly. Maybe, but not if I have anything to say about it. As she walked out, the guard gave her a questioning look. She didn't answer. She had a plan forming in her mind, one that could either save Jason's career or end hers. The next morning, the inquiry began. The room was stark. White walls, a single table, 3 officers seated behind it. Emily stood at attention, hands clasped behind her back. Colonel Davis sat in the middle, flanked by 2 legal officers. Captain Carter, Davis said formally, this hearing is to record the sequence of events that occurred during the Zone C drill. You may speak freely. She nodded. Yes, sir. Start from the moment the explosion occurred. Emily took a breath and began. She described the shock wave, the confusion, the smoke, Jason's behavior, every detail precise. But when she reached the moment he raised the rifle, she hesitated. The officers exchanged glances. Captain? She exhaled slowly. Private Rudd didn't aim to kill. He was disoriented, triggered by the explosion. I assessed his condition as a combat flashback. My actions were intended to de-escalate without harm. One officer leaned forward. Captain, you claim you made a psychological assessment in real time? Yes, sir. Based on his physical symptoms, erratic breathing, and dissociation. And you tackled him rather than stand clear? I did what any combat medic would do, sir. I protected the people around me. The officer scribbled something on his paper. So, you're saying he's not responsible for his actions? Emily's pulse quickened. I'm saying he needs treatment, not punishment. The room went silent. Colonel Davis studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, You're putting your reputation on the line for him, Captain. Emily met his gaze. He would have done the same for me. That evening, she walked out of headquarters, exhausted but strangely lighter. The sun was setting, painting the base gold and crimson. She didn't know what the board would decide. She didn't know if she'd overstepped. But she knew one thing. Silence kills more soldiers than bullets ever could. And she refused to stay silent. Back at the medical bay, the night nurse handed her a folded note. From Rudd, she said softly. Emily unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, but legible. I don't remember everything, but I remember your voice. I don't deserve what you did, but thank you. Maybe I'm not ready to quit just yet. Jay? Emily smiled faintly, her throat tightening. She tucked the note into her pocket and looked out the window. The stars were coming out, one by one, over the quiet Georgia sky. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. But deep down, she knew the story wasn't finished. Not for Jason, not for her. Because sometimes the hardest battles are fought after the shooting stops. Days passed, but the echo of that single rifle shot lingered through Fort Benning like a ghost that refused to die. Captain Emily Carter tried to go back to routine, checking field kits, overseeing training injuries, maintaining her spotless logs, but nothing felt routine anymore. Every hallway whisper, every cautious glance reminded her of that moment on the training field. Private Jason Rudd was still under medical supervision, his fate suspended between two words, unfit or redeemable. And Emily was determined to make sure the board chose the latter. The inquiry had shifted gears. It was no longer just about the incident. Now it was about why it happened. The explosion that had triggered Jason's breakdown was not supposed to occur at all. Official reports claimed it was a malfunctioning charge. But Emily didn't buy that. She'd seen enough military paperwork to know that malfunction was often code for cover-up. Her instincts, those same instincts that had saved Jason, whispered that something deeper was hiding beneath the surface. So she started digging. Late nights in the medical office turned into quiet investigations. She requested after-action reports, safety audits, and supply manifests. Most were redacted. Others didn't match the timeline. And then she found it, a requisition log for the simulation explosives. The lot number used in Zone C was not from standard training stock. It was older, reissued from a previous shipment, marked for combat simulation disposal. Someone had authorized expired ordnance for the exercise. Someone up the chain. Emily leaned back in her chair, the glow of the monitor painting her face pale blue. Her stomach sank. If she was right, that meant the malfunction wasn't random. It was negligence. And Jason's trauma had been triggered by an avoidable mistake. She printed the record, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a file marked confidential. The next morning, she walked into Colonel Davis's office with that file in hand. He looked up from his desk, surprised. "Carter," he said, "I thought we agreed you'd stay clear of the investigation." "With respect." "Sir," she replied, placing the file on his desk. "You need to see this." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "If this is another plea for Rudd, it's not a plea, sir. It's proof." He frowned, flipping open the folder. His eyes scanned the page, requisition forms, timestamps, authorization codes. His expression darkened. "Where did you get this?" "Records Division," she said. "Public access for medical officers." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You went digging, didn't you?" "I had to. That explosion wasn't supposed to happen. The lot number is from decommissioned combat-grade charges. Someone used unsafe equipment. And because of that, one of our soldiers relived a war zone in the middle of Georgia." Davis leaned back, exhaling heavily. "Do you realize what you're suggesting?" "Yes," Emily said firmly. "That this wasn't Jason's fault, and it never should have happened." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Davis closed the folder, his expression unreadable. "Leave this with me." She hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, that's an order, Captain." Her jaw tightened. "Yes, sir?" She left his office, but the unease in her gut only grew. That night, as the base lights dimmed, Emily sat alone on the barrack steps. The Georgia air was thick with humidity, cicadas humming in the dark. Her thoughts spiraled, about Jason, the explosion, and the quiet way the army swept things under the rug. Her phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. "You should stop asking questions, Captain. Some things are better left buried." Her pulse quickened. She looked around instinctively. Empty road, distant guard post, nothing unusual. But the message was clear. Someone knew what she was doing. She deleted it and slipped the phone into her pocket, but the warning stayed lodged in her mind. For the first time since the field incident, she felt afraid, not of Jason, not of the past, but of the system she served. The next day, she went to visit Jason again. The guard nodded her through without question this time. Word had spread that she was the only one he'd talked to. Jason was sitting near the window, sketching in a small notebook. His wrists were free now, his demeanor calmer but distant. "Hey," she said softly, sitting down. He looked up, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You shouldn't keep coming here. They'll start talking." "Let them talk," she replied. "How are you feeling?" He shrugged. "Like I'm in a different kind of cage." Emily nodded, her eyes flicking to the notebook. "What are you drawing?" He turned it toward her. It was a rough sketch of the training field, the overturned truck, the smoke, the silhouettes of soldiers. In the middle, he'd drawn her, crouched beside him, reaching for the rifle. Her chest tightened. "That's accurate. I keep trying to draw it differently," he said quietly, "to make it end another way. But it always ends there." She exhaled slowly. "Maybe that's because it's not over yet." Jason frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily leaned closer. "That explosion wasn't your fault. It wasn't random either. I found the requisition files. Someone authorized bad charges for that drill. You reacted to a real detonation, not a fake one." His eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Completely." He sat back, stunned. "So I wasn't losing it. It was real." "You were triggered by something no one should have been exposed to," she said. "I told Colonel Davis. He's handling it." Jason laughed bitterly. "Handling it? You mean burying it?" Emily met his gaze. "Maybe, but I'm not done." He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're risking a lot for me, Captain." "Not for you," she said. "For what's right." For the first time, a spark returned to his eyes, faint but alive. Later that night, Emily's door was knocked twice hard. She opened it to find Colonel Davis standing there, grim-faced. "We need to talk," he said. She stepped aside. He entered, closing the door behind him. "You were right about the charges," he said quietly. "They came from an old stockpile that should have been destroyed. Logistics confirmed it this afternoon." Emily's heart leapt. But it gets worse," he interrupted. "The authorization signature was forged. Someone used my access code." Her breath caught. "Sir, that means someone inside this base deliberately bypassed safety protocols," he said, lowering his voice. "And they're trying to frame command to keep it quiet." Emily's mind raced. "Do we know who?" "Not yet. But if we start pulling too hard on this thread, it'll unravel fast. You and I both know what that means." She looked at him steadily. "It means the truth comes out." Davis sighed. "It also means careers end. Yours, mine." Emily's voice was calm but firm. "Then so be it." For a moment, the old colonel just stared at her. This medic who had tackled a gunman, defied protocol, and now stood ready to challenge the system itself. Then, finally, he nodded. "All right, Captain," he said quietly. "Let's do this the right way." When he left, Emily sat on the edge of her bunk, heart pounding but steady. Outside, the night hummed with the low murmur of generators. Somewhere on base, soldiers were still awake, training, laughing, unaware of the storm that was about to break. She looked down at her hands, still bearing faint scars from that day, and whispered to herself, "I'm a medic, not a killer. But maybe sometimes you have to fight to save the living." And in that moment, Emily Carter knew there was no turning back. She was about to uncover the truth, no matter who tried to stop her. By dawn, Fort Benning looked the same, but everything had changed. Captain Emily Carter walked across the parade ground with her uniform pressed, her expression unreadable, her heart pounding. To everyone else, she was the same medic who'd tackled a rogue soldier 2 weeks ago. But beneath the calm surface, she and Colonel Davis were working in silence to uncover a secret that could bring down half the base's command. The evidence pointed to a forged authorization. Someone had used Davis's access code to approve the use of expired combat charges during the simulation, the very charges that triggered Jason Rudd's breakdown. The malfunction wasn't an accident. It was an operation gone wrong, or a cover-up waiting to happen. Emily had seen cover-ups before, overseas, after raids that went bad. But this was different. This was home soil. And this time, the silence wasn't for protection. It was to bury guilt. That afternoon, Davis called her into his office again. His blinds were closed. His voice was low. "I checked the access logs," he said. The code was entered from an auxiliary terminal in the logistics hub. Time-stamped 2 hours before the drill. Emily frowned. Who was on duty? He handed her a sheet. Sergeant Mark Whitlow. Her eyes widened. The same Whitlow who coordinated the Zone C exercise. The very one. Davis's jaw tightened. He signed off the safety forms, too. But here's the problem. He doesn't have clearance to access authorization keys. So how'd he do it? Davis hesitated. He didn't. Someone gave him the code. Emily's heart sank. Someone higher. He nodded. And if we go digging without proof, they'll bury us both before we get close. She straightened. Then we get proof. Davis gave a small, tired smile. You don't scare easy, do you, Carter? Not when soldiers' lives are at stake, she said. The next 2 days were spent in quiet surveillance. Emily visited the logistics building under the pretext of inventory checks. She kept her head down, acted casual, but her eyes caught everything. The comings and goings, the logs, the shifts. Whitlow was there, of course, tall, broad, with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been questioned in his career. He noticed her once. Captain Carter, he greeted, tipping his cap. Didn't expect to see you down here. Medical stock usually stays on the other end. Routine inspection, she said smoothly. We've got a new audit coming. He grinned. Figures. You medics love your paperwork. She smiled faintly. Someone has to. As he walked away, she watched him closely. There was something off in his stride, an unease he tried to hide under humor. She made a note of it. Later, she slipped into the records room when the corridor was empty. Inside, rows of file cabinets hummed under fluorescent lights. She scanned through digital logs, cross-referencing signatures and dates. And there it was, Whitlow's ID, logged in 2 hours before the drill. But what caught her eye was the secondary entry. Another ID, 1 minute earlier, from the command floor. Major Stephen Harlan. Emily froze. Harlan wasn't logistics. He was the operations officer, Davis's direct subordinate. If he was involved, it meant the chain of command was compromised from within. She copied the file onto a secure drive, slipped it into her pocket, and left quietly. That night, she met Davis in a secluded section of the officers' mess. The lights were low, the room empty. She slid the drive across the table. You were right. Someone gave Whitlow your code. It was Harlan. Davis's expression hardened. Harlan's been with me for 8 years. Why would he do this? Maybe to hide the use of expired stock. Maybe someone paid him to keep quiet. He shook his head slowly. No, not Harlan. Before he could finish, the door opened. Harlan himself walked in, carrying a coffee mug and looking surprised. Colonel, Captain, he said smoothly. Didn't expect company this late. Davis masked his shock instantly. Just reviewing some reports. Join us? Harlan smiled, setting down his mug. tempting, but I'll pass. Long day tomorrow. He gave Emily a brief, curious glance before leaving again. When the door closed, Davis let out a slow breath. He knows we're looking. Emily nodded. Then we move fast. The next morning, Emily woke to a pounding at her door. 2 MPs stood outside. Captain Carter, one said. You're requested at command immediately. Her pulse spiked. Is this about the investigation? Sir didn't specify. When she arrived, Davis wasn't there. Instead, Major Harlan sat behind the desk. His tone was courteous, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Captain, he said, gesturing to a chair. I'll keep this brief. I've received a report that you've been accessing restricted files without authorization. Emily's heart thudded. With respect, sir, I've been assisting the colonel on. The colonel is unavailable, Harlan interrupted. Until further notice, all inquiries regarding the Zone C incident are suspended. You are to return to medical duty immediately. She stared at him. Suspended? On whose order? He leaned back, clasping his hands. Command authority. That's all you need to know. It wasn't just a warning. It was a shutdown. Emily stood slowly. If this is an attempt to silence me, Major, it won't work. His eyes narrowed slightly. Silence you? Captain, I'm protecting you from a serious violation of protocol. I'd hate to see your spotless record tarnished. Her jaw tightened. You mean the kind of violation that nearly got a soldier killed? Harlan's smile flickered. Careful, Carter. You're walking a fine line. She left without another word. Outside, she took a deep breath of the heavy afternoon air. Her thoughts spun. Harlan had Davis removed from the investigation. That meant he'd already covered his tracks, or worse, he was preparing to frame her. She needed a new ally. That night, she went to the one person who had nothing left to lose, Jason Rudd. He was sitting in the recreation room, staring at a muted TV. When she entered, he straightened. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said quietly. Close enough. She explained everything. The files, the forgery, Harlan's interference. His expression darkened as she spoke. So this whole thing, he said, it wasn't just bad luck. Someone actually caused it. Yes, she said. And they're trying to bury it, and me along with it. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, What if I can help? She frowned. How? When I was deployed, I ran comms. I know how to trace encrypted file transfers. If that authorization was sent through the base network, I can find who really sent it. Emily hesitated. That's a huge risk, Jason. You're still under watch. He gave a small, grim smile. What are they going to do? Kick me out twice? After a long pause, she nodded. All right. We do it tonight. At 01:00 hours, they slipped into the empty communications office. Jason worked quickly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled by as Emily stood guard by the door. After 15 tense minutes, he stopped. Got it, he whispered. Emily leaned over. On the screen, a data log blinked, the authorization transfer from the previous week. It had been routed not from Davis's account, nor from Harlan's terminal directly, but from an encrypted node in the base operations intelligence network. Jason's eyes widened. That's high level. Whoever did this had access above Harlan. Emily's mind raced. You're saying, he pointed to the header, General Robert Leland, the regional commander. The name hit her like a shockwave. Leland was the highest-ranking officer within 200 miles, and the man who'd signed off the inquiry against Jason. She felt the room tilt slightly, her pulse hammering. Oh my God. Jason looked at her. What do we do now? Emily's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. We take it to the Pentagon. But first, we get Colonel Davis back. Outside, the sky was dark and quiet. A storm was gathering far off on the horizon, thunder flickering like artillery beyond the tree line. Emily looked out across the base, the barracks glowing dimly, soldiers sleeping, the flag swaying in the humid wind. And she whispered to herself, almost like a vow, they tried to hide the truth. Now we bring it into the light. But as she and Jason slipped into the shadows, neither of them noticed the unmarked car parked down the street, engine running, lights off, watching them leave. The night was humid, heavy, and silent, except for the faint hum of the unmarked car idling near the perimeter. Captain Emily Carter and Private Jason Rudd moved quickly through shadows, careful to avoid the surveillance cameras they knew dotted the base. Every step, every breath, felt like a gamble. Jason carried a small laptop containing the log from the communications office, the data that linked the Zone C explosion to General Robert Leland himself. Emily carried only her med bag and a quiet determination. "This is insane," Jason muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "We're sneaking through a military base at midnight, trying to prove a general sabotaged a drill. If we get caught, we won't," Emily interrupted, voice firm but low. "We've faced worse. And you're right, someone has to stop this before another soldier gets hurt or worse." Jason swallowed hard. He knew she was right. But somewhere in the back of his mind, fear nagged at him, the fear that the calm, collected officer he admired could be erased in one snap of a superior's authority. They slipped into a small, abandoned storage facility near the edge of the base. The walls were lined with dusty lockers and forgotten equipment. Emily set up the laptop on a makeshift table. Jason began tracing the encrypted transfers from the communications log, fingers moving swiftly, eyes darting toward every corner of the room. Emily watched him, her mind racing. If they got this wrong, or if someone discovered their trace, the consequences wouldn't just be career-ending. This was about lives. Soldiers' lives, hers, Jason's, all hanging in a balance tighter than the rifle she had wrestled from his hands weeks ago. "Got it," Jason whispered suddenly. The glow of the screen reflected in his eyes. "The authorization was masked through multiple nodes, but I traced it back to Leland's secure server. The timestamp matches exactly with when the blast was triggered at Zone C. It's him. He made it happen." Emily felt a cold rush of anger and disbelief. She'd expected negligence, maybe a careless officer, but a general orchestrating an unsafe drill? That was corruption on a scale she hadn't dared imagine. "What's worse," Jason continued, "he also tried to hide it under Harlan's account. Harlan's being used as a scapegoat." Emily's jaw clenched. "Then we expose both. The truth has to come out." Suddenly, a faint noise echoed from outside, a door creaking. Both froze. Jason's hand hovered over the laptop. Emily motioned for him to stay low. Footsteps approached, deliberate and heavy. Emily's pulse quickened, adrenaline surging. She whispered, "Get under the table, now." Jason slid under the metal table just as a shadow fell across the doorway. Major Harlan entered, flashlight in hand, scanning the room. His eyes narrowed when he noticed the open laptop. "Captain Carter," he said, voice low but controlled. "I should have expected you to pry where you don't belong." Emily stood slowly, hands raised slightly. "Harlan, you don't want to do this." He smirked. "I don't want to do a lot of things, but I follow orders." Emily's mind raced. If Harlan noticed Jason, he'd be compromised too. She needed a distraction. "Jason," she whispered, "take the laptop, run out the back exit. Don't stop." Jason hesitated, but Emily gave him a firm nod. He slipped out just as Harlan's attention focused entirely on her. Harlan took a step forward. "Running won't save you, Captain." Leland is protected. You think a single medic can expose a general? Emily squared her shoulders. I don't care how high you go. I won't let another soldier die because of your games. He raised the flashlight. You'll regret this. Emily's training kicked in. She lunged, grabbing a nearby metal rod from the floor. Harlan struck first, swinging his arm at her. She blocked, twisted, and knocked the flashlight from his hand. The beam spun wildly across the room, illuminating boxes, lockers, and Emily's determined face. You've underestimated me, she said, ducking another swing and kicking Harlan toward the wall. Harlan recovered quickly, eyes blazing. You're risking your career, your life, for him? He jabbed at her chest, voice sharp. For Rudd? That boy nearly shot a comrade. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. He was triggered by your negligence. And if you think I'll stay silent, you're wrong. The fight was brief but intense. Emily's every movement was precise, controlled. Years of medic training turned into combat instinct. Harlan stumbled back, off balance, his fist catching only air. Emily kicked, swept his legs, and he crashed into a locker, the sound echoing in the empty room. She pressed her advantage. You made a choice. And so did I. Harlan groaned, trying to rise. Emily grabbed a chair and blocked the doorway. Stay down, she ordered. Then, from behind her, the sound of running boots. Jason reappeared, panting, laptop in hand. Got it, he exclaimed. Emily didn't smile. Good. Now get this to Colonel Davis. He needs to see it before anyone tries to bury it again. Jason nodded, disappearing into the night, while Emily turned her attention back to Harlan. You think you've won, she said quietly. But the truth always finds a way out. Harlan struggled to his knees, a mixture of fear and anger on his face. Emily stepped closer, voice firm. One wrong move, and you'll be the one explaining this to the Pentagon. He glared at her, but said nothing. Emily knew he understood. They waited in tense silence until the sounds of the base night returned to normal. Emily finally released the chair. Harlan stayed on the floor, watching her with a mixture of fury and respect. She grabbed her bag, straightened her uniform, and left. Outside, Jason met her near the tree line, panting but triumphant. I got it to Davis, he said. He's mobilizing. Emily nodded. Good. Now we wait. But we can't stay here. Leland's men will be looking for us. They slipped into the shadows, moving quietly toward the perimeter fence. The base seemed asleep, but Emily knew better. Somewhere, eyes were watching, waiting to see what they'd do next. By dawn, the Pentagon had received the evidence. Colonel Davis and Emily Carter watched from the edge of the base as investigators were dispatched. Orders were being questioned, authorizations double-checked, and Harlan was placed under immediate suspension. Jason, still recovering from the psychological trauma of the Zone C drill, looked at Emily. Do you think it's really over? Emily's face was tired but resolute. No, not yet. But it's closer than it's ever been. Jason nodded, finally allowing a hint of a smile. Then I guess the medic does more than patch people up. Sometimes she saves them from the system too. Emily looked out across the base, sun rising over the horizon, casting light across the shadows of the night. She knew the battle wasn't over. Generals could hide, secrets could fester, and the military hierarchy could be ruthless. But for now, she had proven one undeniable truth. Courage wasn't only about pulling the trigger or saving a life on the battlefield. Sometimes it was about facing the monsters in uniform, exposing the lies, and protecting the vulnerable, no matter the cost. And as she turned back toward Jason, she realized the boy she had once saved on the training field was no longer just a soldier. He was someone who could survive, because someone had refused to let the system destroy him. And she would do it again if she had to. The morning was crisp, unusually quiet for Fort Benning. The usual bustle of boots on gravel and shouted orders seemed muted, almost cautious. Word had spread. Investigators were on the base, and the Pentagon was watching every move. The shadow of accountability had fallen over the officers, and it didn't discriminate. Captain Emily Carter and Private Jason Rudd sat in a small briefing room with Colonel Davis, waiting for the call that would determine the next steps. Jason's laptop, the evidence that had exposed forged authorizations, and the link to General Robert Leland, sat on the table between them. Jason fidgeted, nervously tracing the edge of the laptop with his fingers. "Do you think they'll believe it?" he asked quietly. Emily studied him, noting the subtle tension in his posture. She had been through worse interrogations in war zones, faced officers who doubted her at every turn. She understood his fear, and she knew it was justified. "They will," she said calmly. "You were there. I was there. And we have proof. That's stronger than lies and intimidation." The meeting began with investigators streaming in, armed with clipboards, cameras, and an air of formality that hid the tension beneath. Colonel Davis introduced Emily and Jason, emphasizing their roles in uncovering the truth. A stern-faced investigator spoke first. "Captain Carter, Private Rudd, we understand you have evidence regarding the Zone C incident and the authorization of expired ordnance. Please present it." Jason handed the laptop to the investigator. Emily added the printed logs, timestamps, and access codes. The investigators scanned the material, their expressions hard to read. "According to these logs," one said, "the authorization originated from a secure node assigned to General Leland and was routed through Major Harlan's terminal." Emily nodded. "Yes, it appears that Harlan was used as a scapegoat to cover the general's involvement. The operation was not accidental. It was a deliberate decision that endangered soldiers." A pause. One investigator raised an eyebrow. "This is serious. Direct evidence of a general bypassing safety protocol during a live drill. And potentially framing subordinates?" "Yes," Emily said firmly. "And unless someone acted to intervene, more soldiers could have been harmed. I acted to prevent that harm," Jason added, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I was triggered by the explosion, but it wasn't my fault. It was caused by negligence or worse, intent." The room was quiet. The investigators exchanged glances before one finally spoke. "We'll need to verify these logs directly with the Pentagon's IT department, and they will confirm the encrypted transfers. General Leland will be notified, and a formal inquiry will be opened immediately." Emily and Jason exchanged a tense glance. This was the moment. Hours passed as verification took place. During that time, Emily felt the weight of the past weeks, the rifle in her hands, the fear in Jason's eyes, the silence of officers who had turned their backs. Every detail, every decision had led to this moment. Finally, the lead investigator spoke. "Verification is complete. The data is authentic. General Leland authorized the use of expired ordnance during a live simulation and attempted to conceal it through Major Harlan. Immediate action is required." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Jason exhaled beside her, shoulders slumping with relief. That afternoon, General Leland was suspended pending investigation. Major Harlan was placed on administrative leave. Colonel Davis took temporary command of the base, ensuring that the chain of command remained intact while investigations proceeded. Emily stood outside the briefing room, watching as military police escorted Harlan down the hall. Jason approached her. "Feels like the weight's lifted," he said quietly. Emily shook her head. "Not completely. The system that allowed this to happen is still here, but we've made sure it can't hide forever." Jason smiled faintly. "And you? You're still a medic, right?" Emily's eyes softened. I am. But sometimes being a medic means fighting for the truth, not just treating wounds. They walked together toward the training field, the same field where the incident had occurred weeks ago. Soldiers were practicing drills, laughing, yelling commands, the normalcy of life returning. Emily watched them, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Jason's voice broke her thoughts. You saved me. Not just my life, my career, my mind. I don't know how to repay that. Emily smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. You start by living. And by remembering this, courage isn't only in battle. Sometimes it's in standing up when the system is wrong. He nodded. I'll remember. I promise. Weeks later, Emily was called to testify at a formal Pentagon hearing regarding the incident. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, legal teams, and representatives from multiple branches of the military. She spoke clearly and calmly, recounting every detail, from the moment Jason froze on the training field to the forge authorization, the involvement of Harlan, and the deliberate endangerment of soldiers. Her testimony was thorough, unflinching, and compelling. By the time she finished, even the most skeptical officers acknowledged her bravery and dedication. Jason sat in the audience, quietly observing, pride and gratitude in his eyes. The boy who had once been frozen by trauma now watched the woman who had saved him confront the system itself without fear. The aftermath was significant. General Leland was formally investigated and relieved of command. Major Harlan faced administrative punishment and reassignment. Colonel Davis remained as acting commander, lauded for his support and integrity. And Jason Rudd was cleared of wrongdoing, allowed to continue his training and pursue a career without the shadow of blame. Emily returned to her medic duties, though nothing was truly the same. Soldiers respected her, not just for her skill in the field, but for her courage in standing up to the chain of command when it mattered most. One evening, she sat in the medical bay, cleaning supplies and equipment organized around her, when Jason entered with a small bouquet of flowers. For you, he said quietly. Emily raised an eyebrow. Flowers, really? I thought you deserved them, he said. For saving lives. And for saving me. She took the flowers, smiling softly. Thank you. But remember, the fight isn't always over when you walk away. We have to stay vigilant. Jason nodded. I'll remember. And as they sat there together, the sun setting outside the bay's windows, Emily Carter felt a rare sense of peace. The system had been challenged. The truth had prevailed. And the soldiers who depended on courage, integrity, and skill were safer for it. She reflected on the rifle in her hands weeks ago, the choice she had made in a split second to protect life over protocol. It was a decision that could have cost her career, but it had defined her strength, her dedication, and her humanity. In that quiet moment, she realized something profound. Courage wasn't just about fighting wars abroad. Sometimes it was about standing up for what was right at home, even when the world expected silence. And she would continue to fight, as a medic, a protector, and a witness to truth, no matter the cost.